Welcome to the NCDWI Guide podcast, where defenders of the Constitution assemble to prepare for courtroom battle and firm owners gather to develop marketing strategies that will revolutionize the practice of criminal defense. Here's your host, the NCDWI guy, Jake Minnick.
Hello, fellow freedom fighters, and welcome to episode 215 of the NCDWI Guy podcast. On today's episode, I have a very special presentation to share with you. Allison Williams with The Law Firm Mentor, who is on the podcast back on episode 131, an amazing law firm coach helping lawyers to grow their practices, crush chaos, and make more money in less time. That's the goal and mission of the Law Firm Mentor. Recently did an intake mastery workshop for our Freedom Fighters group. Really impressive presentation that she gave. It's basically about a quarter of the material that she covers in her paid intake mastery course, which is just unbelievable. We have done the paid version of the course here at the firm, and it is incredibly valuable information that Allison shares. She is really somebody that has thought deeply about the intake process, the systems required for intake to run successfully, the people you need to bring aboard in order to have intake run successfully, who to hire, how to train. Really an amazing workshop that she did. On the workshop portion of that mastery course today, you're going to hear a lot about the hiring process for somebody in intake, as well as how to train somebody in the intake role. Really an amazing episode. If you are looking to hire somebody into a reception or intake position at your firm, you're looking to help train your intake team members to become better, this episode, if you were in the workshop, is something now that you can rewatch, re-listen, and kind of reinforce all of the workshop time. And if you weren't able to make the workshop, we're very excited to be able to bring this to you with Allison's blessing. I do a little bit of a deeper dive in her bio here to kick off the workshop. But hope that you guys really take this and utilize it in your firm. She has really changed the way that we've done intake at Minnick Law. This workshop was with the use of a PowerPoint presentation, so it may be more helpful to watch the episode on YouTube versus the normal audio version. If you're used to listening to the podcast in audio, you can definitely get plenty of takeaways either way, but Allison definitely had a really powerful PowerPoint presentation prepared that she shared in the visual side of the episode. So check that out on YouTube. Hope you guys enjoy it. I'm very excited again to have everybody on the call. So I was introduced to Allison a couple years ago when somebody from her marketing team reached out about Allison joining me on the NCDWI Guy podcast that I do. And so episode 131 is Allison joining me and talking through some of these intake questions, hiring, struggles that she sees many firm owners facing. Allison works with a number of firm owners of all different sizes and practice area backgrounds. So she just shared some of the common frustrations and mistakes that she sees. So it was a really great episode, fun episode. And after we did that call, just based on some of the content that Allison had shared, our intake team and myself did basically her mastery, intake mastery workshop that she has on her website. So it was a paid 6.5 hour plus class, about six different workshop sessions, and just killer content. I mean, we really changed a lot of things in our intake process based on kind of Allison laying out how to hire for intake, what the job and role of intake is, what the process is, how to discuss money. I mean, just all things intake. And so from that workshop that we did, not only did we change a lot of our internal processes, but invited Allison to come and speak at the summit. Unfortunately, a few weeks before the summit, Allison ended up breaking her right foot and had to have surgery. And so we missed Allison at last year's summit, but fortunately, one of her coaches, Jesse Fry, who is based out of Asheville, came to last year's summit and knocked it out of the park, hit a grand slam, stepped up to the plate, and he'll be back at this year's summit in September. Jesse is happy to talk with anybody in the Asheville area about all of the kind of ways that the Law Firm Mentor helps with coaching and marketing and business strategy. I think he and I have coffee lined up for Thursday. So Jesse's been a great person to get to know. But Allison has started kind of in the family practice area and built her family practice, Williams Law Group, up to a multi-million-dollar firm in just 3.5 years. Then wanted to kind of bring the same principles that led to her success into coaching. And so started the Law Firm Mentor and has just an incredible amount of resources, offers coaching services. And again, just from personally kind of using the intake mastery course that really has changed the way that we've done our intake process. So full endorsement on my end, Allison, and very excited to have you on the call, and really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us today.
All right. Thank you so much, James. I'm really excited to be here with you guys. And I know that I am personally new to your community, but I'll give you some ways that I like to share information with folks so that you guys can get the most out of this experience. As was shared at the outset, I am very interactive in the way that I like to share information. So as we go through this, I don't want you to think of me as a talking head. We have a lot to cover. I'm going to give you guys a lot of the principles that are actually taught in the Intake Mastery course. Of course, we're together for a couple of hours, but the course is much more extensive. But we are going to touch on some of the key things that are really important to optimize your intake. So even if you do nothing else other than give me some of your time today, I promise you will walk away with something of value to your law firm. And if you are a +1 or an admin or an intake professional in a law firm, you're going to walk away with something that's going to make your role easier, better, faster, and more successful. So with that, I'm going to share my screen here.
I did allow that advanced. Yeah, you're good to go. Thanks.
Yep. You see it, Intake Mastery for Law Firms?
Yes.
Okay. So just a little heads up as we go through this. I tend to be best in terms of answering questions as we go. I know a lot of folks have some hesitancy around that. Sometimes people wait until the end. I'm a big proponent of checking in with you guys, making sure that you're understanding me, making sure that the concepts make sense, and making sure that as we go through, that you're getting out of it what you need. So that means work the chat. Talk to me in the chat. If you don't understand something, you understood it, but you're doing something different. You have a question about whether something makes sense. Super important that you immediately jump that into the chat, because when you have a question, almost invariably someone else does as well. And you are helping everyone to get the best out of this program when we have those conversations. The other thing I will share with you guys as we get started today is that I am somewhat of a tech-tastrophe. Whenever me and tech collide, there is almost always something that goes wrong. I'm at one of my homes right now. I'm in lovely Baltimore, Maryland, and I have 5 screens. They don't always like to play nicely with each other. So if at some point in time I lose my mouse, I'll probably tell you that during the program. That's unfortunate. We will find her soon. But that's part of the reason why I am not already addressing the one comment that is in the chat. But for that, I do want to just give you guys a little heads up. I apologize in advance for any tech issues we have that could be slowing down the progress.
I will also monitor the chat and then just kind of share questions as they come in. So.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so if I can just find my little mouse, you can get the first chat area up. That's kind of the biggie, because I do like to hear from folks as we go through. One thing I do want to ask you guys as we get started is, who is here? Are you guys, I know from kind of the pre-work for this program that many of you are law firm owners. I am presuming that many of you are criminal defense lawyers, but there may be other practice areas, or you may have multiple areas in your firm. You guys would drop your practice area into the chat. That would be great. And then also for those of you that are perhaps not law firm owners, maybe you are law firm administrators, maybe you are intake professionals, maybe you do consultations, maybe you're a non-attorney salesperson, maybe you actually sell in the law firm. Let me know that as well. I want to know who I'm talking to as we get started. All right, we were just there. We are already kicking off with a lovely techastrophe. I love it when that happens. Welcome to Tuesday. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to take myself off the video so that you guys can focus in on the screen. And like I said, I'm going to be monitoring the chat as we go through. Questions are always invited, welcomed. And at some point in time, if it's an involved question, I might call you out by name and ask you to unmute so that we can actually have a conversation together. So let me just pull this up here and we're going to dive right in. There we go. Found my little friend here. Okay. Love it. All right. I see Intake King Law Offices. Yes. I know Brian King well. He's a great guy. All right. King Law Offices, Minnick Law. Okay. Director of Business Development. Okay. Great job, Carissa. Okay. King's GM, Growth Development, Criminal Defense and Traffic. Okay. Banks Huntley, Criminal Defense, Solo Owner. And yes, please ask questions. Okay. So let's go ahead and dive in. So as I said before, intake mastery is about optimizing intake. That's what our goal is for this program. We really want to make sure that as we are focusing on all the topics that we cover today, that we're thinking about ways that we can better our best, okay? So I never like to say somebody's intake system is broken or you're doing a bad job or it's crappy. We always start with what can we do better, because for most people, they stop where they get overwhelmed. And the biggest area of overwhelm tends to be when we start thinking, I have so many things to do. I just don't have time for this. I got to get to court. I got new clients to serve. I don't really have time to break and make. I can fix something when it comes to, optimal, but I can't get there right now. So I want you to think about this as just a little bit of shifting. There are a lot of little things that you can shift that can get you a lot more money and make your intake system a lot more automatic. So that's what we're really going to be talking about today. We have a lot of different components of that. So as we dive in, again, love to see those comments and love to see those questions in the chat. And we're going to start right now. Okay, so the first thing I want to cover, okay, why are we, again, the mouse is mousing, so apologize for that. There we go, I found her. Here we go. All right. So first thing is, you already have been introduced to me and my company. The company is Law Firm Mentor. We are a business coaching service for solo and small law firm attorneys, but particularly for lawyer CEOs. We help lawyers who desire to be truly the masters of their own destiny, and we help them to grow their revenues, crush chaos in business, and make more money. And the crush chaos piece is all about creating systems. So today we're going to be talking about the system of intake, and everything within the system of intake has its own system. So there is a system for how to hire an intake professional. There is a system for how to track the success of your intake systems. There is a system for how to sell people over the phone. There is a system for how to generate the most dollars from your sales process. All of that we are going to cover in today's program. Now, for those of you that have not heard anything about Law Firm Mentor, you should know that I am not a singular in this. I have a wonderful team of amazing coaches. You already heard that one of our coaches, Jesse Fry, Jesse is there on the end on the left, was at your summit last year. And the rest of my coach team, we are all very specialized in what we do. So what I mean by that is everyone has an area of expertise, even though all of our coaches coach on all of the subjects of business. So that when you need something particularly destined, right, you need something that is specialized, you can go to the coach who is most specialized in that area of expertise. Everyone here has over a decade of experience serving law firms in particular. That is a criteria to work in our company. And all of us not only work with law firms, but have had success in creating at least $500,000 in revenue in a 2-year time period in a law firm. That is another criteria that I have that has to be achieved for every person that joins our coach team. So as specialists in this area, we have created and attracted an amazing community of clients. And our clients are from all over the country, and now they are in 3 countries across the world. Our clients represent 76 practice areas, including criminal defense. And one of the things that I love about our client community is that they have created a lot of different types of law firms. So the intake processes that we're going to talk about are not particular to a particular type of law firm. We have contingency lawyers that use intake mastery. We have hourly billing lawyers that use intake mastery. We have a whole lot of flat fee folks that use intake mastery. The principles apply whether you are in a small firm, a large firm, a firm with lots of different practice areas, or a boutique practice. These principles are sales principles. So they apply no matter what kind of principles, no matter what type of firm that you are creating. Now, for those of you that are also curious, I am also a practicing lawyer. I have been a lawyer for 20 years now. It feels bad to say that out loud, but this is my law firm. I have a wonderful team, lovely folks in Parsippany, New Jersey, also Stuart Hills, New Jersey, one of the most affluent areas in the country. And we serve folks in the world of family law. I state that only because a lot of people believe when they are hearing from someone teaching business principles that if you are not doing the work, you are somehow less validated, i.e., you don't know because you're not a lawyer, because you don't know what it is to run a law firm, because you don't know what today's economy is like, because you don't know what the principles are in a practice of law. I happen to know those things because I do those things, and I happen to run both my multiple 7-figure law firm and my multiple 7-figure coaching company contemporaneously because I assemble great people to do the work, and I teach them and train them very hard, which is what you're going to learn about today. So our agenda for today is we're going to cover the requirements of an intake system. We're going to talk about the mindset of phone sales. There is something you need to know about that in particular. Selling on the phone is not the same as selling in person. We're going to talk about sourcing the role of intake. We are going to talk about training your professional. And finally, we're going to talk about money mindset in intake, i.e., what do you need to know about how money operates in the minds of most humans so that you can have the most qualitatively valuable, important conversation with them that gets you paid on time, and gets you paid at the highest value for your service. All right, this is the only slide on the requirements of intake. So if you are one of those folks that loves to play on your phone during these types of presentations, now is the time to pull out the camera, okay? Requirements of an intake system. We're going to go back to this over and over again, but these are the must-haves. You must have a defined step-by-step process. Your process must include a training process, okay? Training someone is not giving them a worksheet or an audio or a script and saying, here, go read this and give it a whirl. Training is a process, and it's a very involved process, which I'm going to walk you through a little bit later, okay? A personable, inquisitive employee, we like to refer to this as a piece of pie. You need a piece of pie in your intake system. You must have someone who fits all of these criteria. And yes, by employee, I am talking about someone who meets the definitional requirements of being under your umbrella. That does not mean, however, that you cannot have a phone system. You can have Smith AI or Ruby Receptionist or Back Office Betties or any number of other VA services that answer the phones for you, but they have to qualitatively fit the criteria of an employee for purposes of your hire, which we're going to talk about again a little bit later. You need to have PNC prospect tracking. In other words, you need to know what happens when folks call your firm. When they call your firm, do they terminate at the call? Do they speak to someone? How long do they speak to them? What is the result of the conversation? And what is the result of the ultimate sale? Okay, and we're going to talk about how to track those things a little bit more in depth a little bit later today. You need a script with talking points. By talking points, I mean you do not want to have verbatim every single word that a human being has to say on the phone, but you do want to have the key things that must be covered, almost like a checklist, but things that must be said to represent your firm and to seed to the people on the phone that you are the right hire for them. The time to convince someone to hire you is not when you ask them for money. The time to convince them is throughout everything that you say and the subtle ways that you do that all throughout the conversation. Okay, you need to also have responses to objections. Okay, by the way, David, I love that you're 6 months of solo no staff. By the way, congratulations. It takes a lot of shit to go into practice of law, but it takes even more to go into the business of law. So kudos to you for being new at this. All right. And then finally, you need a conflict check system. Okay. For a lot of folks, you're probably thinking, hey, my adversary is the state of fill in the blank. Why do I need a conflict check system? And that is simply because you can represent co-defendants, you can represent cross-claimants, you can represent people who are adverse to the interests of your client in a variety of different ways. So of course, even in criminal defense, you need to have a conflict check system. Okay. This slide is going, and it will soon to be gone. It is not ever coming back. So if you need a picture, get your picture now. All right, moving on. We are now going to talk about your business ecosystem. Okay, what do I mean by that? I want you to understand conceptually, when we talk about intake, intake is a part of moving a person from awareness of your firm to being a client. Okay, intake is one piece of that. You should understand all of the pieces along what we're going to refer to as the conveyor belt of intake in order to get the most optimized performance of the intake component of your system. So the conveyor belt system is very simple. Okay, there's 4 key parts to move a person from awareness of your firm to becoming a client. First, reception. Okay, you need to have someone that greets your human. Now, that does not mean you have to have an in-house receptionist. You could have a phone service. You could have your intake person be the person who answers the phones. I don't recommend it for a host of reasons, but you could do that. Some human that first contacts the human on the outside of the firm trying to get in, that is reception. Reception is for building rapport, creating connection, welcoming in, opening up, framing safety. We're here to help. That is what should be connoted at the reception stage of your firm. Now, once we're past reception, we're moving along our conveyor belt over to intake. Intake is where we start to dig deep. Okay, this person has said, I need help with a problem. You're here now to ask the right questions. You want to activate listening. You want to influence without coercion, and you want to guide the conversation. This is how you lead someone down the conveyor belt. They should have a natural feeling from talking to you during intake that the next logical step for them is to hire you. They haven't made the decision to hire you yet. You haven't sold them yet, but your aim is to have them leave the call feeling, and we're going to talk about how to accomplish this, but they should leave the call feeling that it is natural that the next step in the process is that they come see you so they can hire you. Okay, there are very subtle cues that you embed in the conversation in order to do this. This is how you seed the conversation. You subtly cue things up so that people are thinking about, hey, my next step is this is going to be my lawyer. Okay, intake transfers anticipation of resolve to sales. Okay, so by the time the person gets off the intake call, they should have a feeling of urgency of, I have got to get in as soon as possible so I can get to my answer. Okay, the phone call is not the answer. The phone call is not the answer if you are talking to someone who is sitting in jail. The phone call is not the answer if you're talking to someone whose son, daughter, cousin, boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband, next door neighbor has just been criminally prosecuted. Your aim when you're on the phone is to get the person urgent to hire. Okay, urgent to hire might be presumed in certain circumstances, right? The person calls you and says, hey, little Timmy is in jail. I need someone now. I'll pay you whatever. That person is urgent to hire. Most people are not in that scenario when they call, right? Most people have either already gone through some process, they've already been charged, they have already been arrested, they've already been released. They're now looking to solve the problem of not having a criminal prosecution or not having a record, or maybe they're at the point where they know they're going to have a prosecution. The question is just how little time can I get, right? But however they get there, they're at the place of, I need to get this solved. You want to have that anticipation in the conversation at intake. If you don't accomplish it at intake, that doesn't mean you can't sell the person. It just makes it statistically much harder. All right. Part 3 of your ecosystem, sales and consultations. Okay. This is the net effect of doing nothing or taking contrary action. You want to frame it in the mind of your person that they always have a choice. You don't want a person to feel like you are telling them your life is going to come to an end unless you do X, Y, Z, right? You don't want to pressurize someone into buying, because people that buy in that type of pressure, in that type of urgency, oftentimes regret their purchase later. These are the people that do chargebacks. These are the people that become shitty clients. These are the people that you can't get a hold of. These are not the clients that we want to cultivate. these people can be clients that are wonderful clients, right? There are some humans that are just difficult to work with, but for the most part, most people, if they have the right conversation, they can approach it with the right attitude. You want to get them to a place where they see it as, I'm either going to sign up with David or I'm going to be screwed, right? The I'm going to be screwed piece is I do nothing. Now, I do nothing in their mind might be I go down the street to another lawyer who I think I can get it cheaper from. But in their mind, they have to think of that as a loss, not as an opportunity for a win down the road. Okay, so that's about framing. It's very important that you learn how to sell. This is not exactly what we're covering today, but we do have resources on selling in our membership. We have an entire membership that's dedicated to different categories of learning. We have a sales academy where we can teach you how to sell. But today we're going to talk about selling on the phone, because that piece of it, if you don't cue this up appropriately, you're not going to knock it down the pike. Okay. Now, sales, once you have gotten to the point of a sales conversation, your next transfer is going to be over to legal. And that, of course, is where the legal work is done. Pretty simple, right? This conveyor belt has to move seamlessly. From the time a person gets onto the conveyor belt at reception to the time that they get over to the lawyer doing the work. And I don't care if there's one human, I don't care if you're the only lawyer, the only human being in your company. You're the person who answers the phone, you're the person who does intake, you're the person who sells, and you're the person who does the legal work. Or if you have 4 different humans, or 15, 20, 70, 80, 100, 200 humans doing those roles in different ways, there needs to be a seamless moving of messaging throughout each of those roles so that people will ultimately feel that they are naturally progressing to their ultimate win, which is hiring you and getting their problem solved. Some common ways you've seen intake urgency in the criminal defense practice area. So there's lots of different ways that we see intake urgency. A lot of it is person has called in because they are terrified that they're going to have a criminal record. So these are first-time offenders. They're oftentimes people who have low-level offenses. It could be people prosecuted in municipal court. These folks are the folks that have never engaged or have engaged only tangentially with the criminal practice, right? With law enforcement. Then you have folks that engage regularly and they may be repeat offenders, but this time it matters to them for some reason why they don't want to be prosecuted, right? Could be, dad has a new baby on the way. Could be person has done jail multiple times. They know this is their 3rd strike, right? Person could have a fear that this time, because the law has changed, they're going to be charged more harshly. They're going to have a tougher sentence. Maybe sentencing guidelines have become mandatory instead of discretionary in their jurisdiction. Could be a number of things, right? The urgency really depends on the person's circumstances, but the ways that we find urgency is by asking people why they want to solve their problem now. Okay, and at some point in the conversation, we're going to talk about that when we get to scripting. At some point in the conversation, it's going to be really important that we find out why they want to solve their problem now. Because if they say to you, I don't want a criminal record, that's a very different answer than I don't want to leave my new baby, which is a very different answer than I don't want to humiliate my parents, which is a very different answer than I know I'm only going to get probation for this, but I don't want to lose my job opportunity, right? So you have to appeal to the human based on what that particular person desires. And you'll start to learn what some of them are based on the different practice areas within your practice area, right? So you'll start to see what is a white collar crime urgency point versus what is a petty disorderly person's urgency point versus what is a common drug offense urgency point. Those urgency points will start to become categorical, and they will start to be something that you're going to document, which we're going to talk about in the training section. You're going to be documenting that as you actually go through the process of building out your scripts so that your team can start issue spotting right away, ask those questions, and learn how to stoke the pain. Okay, stoking the pain is really about seeding that the person really has an urgency point that they should be paying attention to. That is all about how you communicate on the phone and what you say to intimate to them that their problem is as significant as they think it is and could be worse. Okay, you're not going to say it could be worse, but you're going to intimate it in a way that gives them some pause. All right. So the art of active listening is something that has to be woven into this process. And the art of active listening is an acronym for authority, repeat, and training. For authority, you want to convey leadership in your calls. Okay. If you learn nothing else in this call, You want to understand that the person with the most confidence wins. So you want to convey that you, by you, I'm talking to the person on the phone, right? Whoever that person is, we're going to call that person mythical intake professional. Intake professional has to convey that they are confident, that they ultimately want to lead the person to a better outcome. And they want to obtain from the person a level of deference. Okay, that doesn't mean you tell the person, hey, stop talking because I'm in charge here. Okay, that might be what you're thinking. That's not what you're going to say. You're going to talk to the person in a way that makes them feel heard, but at the same time conveys to them, hey, our goal is to get you to the best outcome. And I'm the authority on how to do that, right? I'm the person that can get you to where you want to go. It's very subtle languaging, but confidence is typically 90% of what will convey that to a person on the phone. Okay, repeat. When a person talks to you on the phone, you're going to have to learn the art of repeating back to them what they've said. Why? Because people value what they think and say more than what you think and say. They don't know you. I don't care that you have a big degree. I don't care that you're a great lawyer. I don't care that you've got your name on the door. They think more of themselves than they think of you. If they did not think more of themselves than they thought of you or someone external to you, they wouldn't be in the situation that they're in. Just think about that for a moment, right? Most people, when they commit a crime, don't say, well, I think the law is that I'm allowed to knock off this liquor store and take the cash register inside because I'm short on money, right? They don't have that thought. They think it is a better thought to give value to, that they desire the cash, so they're going to go get the cash. Regardless of what someone and something external to them, i.e. the law, has said is not to happen. The law says you shouldn't do this. They say they should. Okay, we are all self-centered in that way. All human beings, psychologically. Most people, whether they say it or not, have to be convinced into what you say. And if what you say is what they say, they're going to inherently believe in you more. So if I say, man, it really sucks that I am having to deal with this prosecutor, and at some point in our conversation, you say, man, I know it really sucks that you have to deal with this prosecutor. They hear themselves in you. They believe in you more just by virtue of that, okay? So some of the process of scripting is going to include the rinse and repeat. They say something, you spin it, and you turn it back around to them, okay? And by spin it, I don't mean you change it. I mean, you're going to use some of the exact same words. Now, training, of course, reinforces the desired activity. And this is really important. The training component of intake is probably where most lawyers that we work with have had the greatest difficulty. It's not that you don't hire good people. It's not that you don't give them a good script. It's not that you don't teach them how to put data in your CRM. It's that they lose some of the nuance and the subtlety that is inherently necessary in this type of practice area because you have not trained them well enough. Okay, so some good examples of the repeat thing, Andy. We're going to go through it a little bit more when we get to the training part. But one of the things I'll tell you is at some point you're going to, in the intake call, you're going to ask the person, if I could give, if I could wave a magic wand right now and give you exactly what you wanted. I mean, obviously, I know you want not to be prosecuted, right? But if I could give you what you wanted in terms of how quickly this is going to happen, the result you're going to get, the time you're going to get, the sentence you're going to get, what would that be? You're going to ask the person, and they're going to tell you that, and you're going to continue on in your script. And then later, and I say later, that usually means one or two statements later, you're going to say back to them, well, ideally, when you have fill in the blank, whatever they told you, right? They told you they want not to see their child in jail. They told you they want not to have a criminal record. They told you they want not to be embarrassed. They told you they want not to lose a job opportunity. You're going to say, so, when that magic wand that we are going to help create for you increases the likelihood of you being able to not have a criminal prosecution so that you don't have that record, they're going to hear the thing that matters to them come out of you. And they're going to hear it in a way that mirrors the way in which they have said it, okay? Now, the way in which they've said it is something that we're going to talk about called TEP, which is tone, empathy, pace, pattern, and transition, okay? And we're going to talk about that in a lot of detail. That's actually how you actually move the call along and how you get into that mirroring. But that's a really good question, Andy, and I promise you're going to go into more detail on it a little bit later. Okay, so the ROI on intake. The best way that you ensure that you receive your return on investment that you make in your law firm intake process and professional is to track every aspect of your marketing, intake, and sales funnel. Now, for some of you, you might be thinking, oh my God, I don't have the money right now for a really sophisticated CRM, right? That can be hundreds and thousands of dollars a month. I don't have it. That's okay. Start simple. Start simple with every human that calls your law firm. Create an Excel spreadsheet. The name, the phone number, the email, what happened, okay? Every single call. You need this data for reasons that will help you to make nuanced changes, right? Remember, we talked about small hinges swing big doors, right? We're not talking about gutting everything and starting over. We're talking about changing the way we say something on the phone, changing the pace that we use when we're talking to people, changing how frequently we mirror, asking questions a certain percentage of the time, right? We're going to talk about the 30% rule, which is the intake professional should not talk more than 30% of the call. And there are AI tools that you can use to actually measure that. You do want to be measuring that, okay? Exactly. What gets measured gets improved, 1000%. And your focus, as I said earlier, we talk about crushing chaos here at Law Firm Mentor. Your focus has to be on systems, okay? That means, as with all systems, your intake system is going to require the creation of a system, its improvement. You're going to have scheduled check-ins to optimize it. You're going to refine it, and you are going to reiterate, okay? The intake system that works for a solopreneur who has no staff is very different than the intake system that works for a law firm of 5 lawyers with 3 staff members, which is very different than a law firm that has 40 lawyers and 200 staff people, okay? So qualitatively, you have to get into the mindset of we are going to be rinsing, repeating, and changing this over the course of time. You're going to build a system around optimizing your system, okay? And if you build it from start, the beautiful thing is you can calendar out at certain points of growth when you're going to change your system so that it doesn't become one of those things that you look up and you say, oh shit, I'm making a lot less money this month than I want to, what's wrong? And you have to issue spot. Instead, you say, oh wait, we have grown to the point where we've increased our revenue by 40%. As a result, it is now time for us to review our intake system. All right, now we're going to talk about sourcing the role. But before we do that, I just want to check in with you guys and make sure you guys are still awake out there. For those of you that are not on camera, how are you guys doing? Is somebody paying attention out there? Are you with me on the conveyor belt system of intake? Do we understand that we need to have reception to intake, to sales, to legal? Do we understand that we have to be able to have nuanced conversations and we have to be able to code language? And no one is talking in the chat, which means I need to stop asking questions. I am not going to continue until I know that you guys are with me. All right, I'm getting some yes. I got a thumbs up. We love the thumbs up. Thank God for emojis in our chats now. Thank you, Zoom. All right, yes, 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 yes. I don't know what that's a yes to. Probably one of those 1,000 questions I ask. That's why you don't ask compound questions. I promise as a litigator, I don't do that in court, but I do it sometimes when I talk because I like to do that. All right, know that you guys are with me, so we're gonna keep moving on. All right, let's talk about now sourcing the role, okay? I referred to this earlier. This is the piece of pie, the personable, inquisitive employee. We're going to talk about each of these component pieces, okay? The employee has to be personable. Let's go back for a second, okay? This has to be somebody that you like to talk to on the phone. I know that's kind of a shit kicker. Most people are like, what do you mean I have to like the person? You know, I just need them to sell my humans. I just need them to take the name and get the phone number and get them on my calendar. Here's the thing. If you don't like to hear your person on the phone, your clients won't like to hear your person on the phone, okay? If we already have staff, is there a delicate way to discuss their skill set with them to suggest roles? That's a great question, Ronald. And yes, there are different ways that you can do that. And one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit later is a process in the hiring process of using assessments. And I recommend assessments not only for when you are hiring, but also if you have already assembled a team, it's really great to know how to work with your team, how to optimize their performance. The tool that I use religiously now and that I recommend to everyone is called Real Talent Hiring. You can find it at realtalenthiring.com. A guy named Jay Henderson owns it. Jay is a phenomenal resource. And that particular assessment tool tells you things about a person's skill set that you can't necessarily see in the interview or even when they first start. These are the kind of their stress points, things that they default to as they are working in your work environment. And once you have that information, you can actually see what sorts of things appeal to them. So you know what types of messaging is going to work more effectively with them when you do address skill deficit, or attitude deficit. Okay. So definitely a lot of resources on the market, but that's a great one. Now, you need your person to be inquisitive. We're going to talk about that as well, right? Inquisitive is not just they ask a question or two or they're curious, but it is a probative function that you're going to test for when you hire them. And employee, right? We already talked about the fact that an employee is under the purview of your company. This is somebody that you have the ability to train and evolve. So you can actually work with call centers to become functionally an employee. There are lots of people that do that and lots of law firms that do it well. Most law firms that don't do well with call centers just expect the call center to answer their calls with whatever they tell them to ask for and that they're going to get a great result. And the reality is, if you don't tell the call center the same way that you tell your employee how you want your calls answered, where you want tonal changes to be inflected into the call, where you want certain questions to be asked, how questions are to be asked. If you don't train them up the same way you train up an employee, they're not going to do a great job for you, okay? So personable, inquisitive employee. Now, what does that mean? So first, you want to source the role by starting with a phone interview, and you want to figure out, again, if you like the person, you like the sound of their voice, or one of my personal favorites, how naturally enthusiastic or upbeat is this person, right? Is it more or less than you would expect given what they're talking about? This is simple, right? This is kind of like common sense 101. If you bring someone into your office or you have a Zoom meeting with them and you ask them on the phone, you ask them to role play for you on the phone, how they would answer the call, and they're talking to somebody who's just been accused of rape, and they pick up the phone and say, "Hey, my name is Steve." And then the person on the phone says, well, I was just charged. My girlfriend and I kind of like, we were both drinking. It wasn't my fault, but like she made this claim and now I'm really scared. That person probably is not the right one for you, okay? That person has a dysregulation in their mind between what is an appropriate affect and an appropriate presentation when they are hearing information that is discordant with their natural personality. Most people are not that extreme, but there is an area of gradation. Phone interviews really help you to pick that out. And when a person is going to be spending most of their time on the phone, yes, they're going to be answering phone calls and entering data into CRMs. Yes, they're going to be following up with things, but they are going to be on the phone. You need to know that they have some basic phone etiquette and some basic common sense as to how to regulate themselves relative to other people. So second, we need to have an inquisitive nature, right? Does the candidate ask questions at the interview? This is really key. If you interview somebody and they don't ask you a single question, then they're in it for the paycheck. Nothing wrong with wanting a paycheck, okay? Absolutely nothing wrong with it. Let's not demonize that. But if they aren't curious about the role to know that they can be successful, they're not a success-oriented person. And you can have a success-oriented person, whether they are a high school dropout or they are a Mensa candidate. It really doesn't matter. It's the orientation of the human that you're looking for. Now, finally, you want to know, does the person appear genuinely interested? And that's very simple, right? Are they looking for what their day is going to be like? Are they curious what success looks like? Do they want to know how they're going to be able to advance? How they're going to be able to do a good job? How will they know if they're successful? How are they going to be measured? What sorts of things are they going to be doing every day? Those are the types of questions you would expect from somebody who actually wants the job and not just the paycheck. And then finally, you want to ask questions and seek information designed to test investigative skills. Now, we're going to talk about some examples of this in a minute. This is a biggie, right? You want to have a person who has a probative nature. And by that, we mean somebody who genuinely seeks out greater understanding. Sometimes that happens in the form of parroting back what you say to make sure that they understand it. Sometimes that comes in directly asking questions. And that, by the way, is not something that you necessarily build up over time. I have had very, very inquisitive intake professional candidates. I've had very non-inquisitive lawyers. You would be surprised, okay? It is about how the person orients themselves to the importance of the work that they do. So you want somebody who sees the work that they do as something that is going to fulfill them, something that is going to be necessary for them to be successful at. And if they don't get that, you're not going to be able to know that this person is going to likely do a good job for you. Now, final thing we have up here is asking about a person's general interest in life and people. You need a person who is a people person to a certain degree. That doesn't mean they have to be an extrovert. They can be an introvert. They can be a quiet person. They can be a shy person, but they have to have a general interest in people. They have to like story, right? So when you ask questions about a person's interest, you could ask them, like, what's the last thing you watched on Netflix? You know, if they're watching stories like documentaries, if they are watching true crime dramas, if they are looking for reality TV, but they're looking at it from the perspective of, what is the drama that's going to happen, right? Some of that might seem a little superfluous, but at the heart of it, what you're looking for is a person who has an intuitive nature toward people, because they're going to have to spend their time sussing out people on the phone, right? Getting at the heart of what a person truly desires is not as simple as asking, what do you truly desire? There's some of that, but there is also some intuition that goes into it. And a lot of that is built up by being a people person. And we talk a lot about intuition being a feminine trait. In my experience, my best intake professionals have actually been men. So I don't buy the story that it is a female characteristic that is inherently better at intake or better at being on the phone. It is a human attribute. It's who the human is and what do they desire and what interests them. All right, for employee, are they under the authority of your company, right? Do you have the ability to listen to their calls? Do you have the ability to train them? Do you have the ability to dedicate your process to them and them to your process, right? If this is a person who is doing some part-time work for you, a VA, or if they're at a VA company or a call center type company, you need to know that you have a dedicated person, or if nothing else, you have a bank of people who are dedicated to a process that has to be followed meticulously. If you don't have that level of control, then you don't have the level of control over your outcomes that you really need to be able to optimize your system. And then, of course, you want to know that the person can ebb and flow with the role, right? Because there are going to be times where maybe you're a little light on calls this month, but maybe you need the person to do something else, right? Maybe the person can add value in other ways. Intake oftentimes goes hand in hand with marketing, because the number of people that are calling the firm directly influences the degree to which the person on the intake calls can be able to get people scheduled, right? So you want to make sure that there is a relationship between your intake and your marketing. And if you are the only person in your firm doing marketing, they need to have that relationship with you. All right, the phone interview. What to listen for, what is said, what is not said, how communication is delivered, and is the person prepared? I have never, ever, ever seen a person show up to a phone interview late or calling in versus having been told that you will be calling them, or sitting in a car on the side of the road and be the right person for the role. Not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying I have not seen it. Part of the reason why is because you're looking for a person who is, again, interested, dedicated, seeking out this role. If they blew it off such that they couldn't figure out a way to not be in the car, or if they were going to need to be in the car, let's say that the only time you could make available for them was 5:30, and they say, I'll be picking up my kids from daycare, but I promise I will have had them dropped off by them, but I'll be driving to an event that night. Is it okay if I take the call in the car? That's fine, right? Because they're letting you know and you're given the option. If they just show up sitting in the car while traffic is whizzing by, that's a lack of judgment in terms of what is actually acceptable for etiquette for an interview. So you want to be cautious about that. Now, the second interview is going to be the in-person with your team. And by team, I mean who would be involved with this person other than you. If it's just you and the firm, this does not apply, even though you can outsource it to a friend, a colleague, a third party, et cetera, to do this for you. Maybe you trade off, I'll interview your person on second interview, you interview my person. But if you have a team, I highly recommend you involve your team. They need to know how this person will interact with your culture. How are they going to fit with the humans you have here? Are they going to work well with the personalities that are already on deck? And then finally, the last interview is with the owner or the hiring team. Now, when I say the owner, there are a whole lot of law firms where the owner is out of hiring, myself included. So it doesn't have to be the owner. but it needs to be the most senior person who would ever be involved with giving instruction to, oversight, supervision of your intake professional. And you want to have that person available to compare and contrast what was said in the last interview. This is where you catch people, right? A whole lot of us have interviewed people, hired folks, and next thing you know, the person comes in, you're like, oh, this person interviewed so great, they had great references, et cetera, and they just are nothing like what you thought they were going to be, right? They phone it in, they don't have the right attitude, they don't have the right tenacity, they can't get things done at the level that you would have expected. And you're thinking, how is this possible? I checked references, I interviewed them hard, like I don't really get this. Sometimes what you pick up on when you have multiple eyes and ears on a candidate is you pick up on how a person has rehearsed a story so well that they almost believe it themselves. And when you learn how to do better interviewing and get good at behavioral interviewing, asking questions of not just, can you do this, but show me how you've done this. Give me an example of when you've done this in the past. What would happen in the 17th step of this process if you were to do A, B, and C, and then ultimately something fell apart? Tell me what your issue spotting is going to be. How frequently have you done this? Give me an example of when you did this and it didn't work out well, right? When you start to learn how to take what a person gives you and massage it and work it out, you'll start to see that the second interview is really the practiced, rehearsed interview. The third interview is either going to hold consistent with that or it's going to fall apart. And that's where you ultimately save yourself the headache of hiring people who are really just tire kickers looking for the paycheck. All right, the phone interview. Basic questions. We covered this a little bit before, but I'm going to go through them pretty quickly so we can keep moving, right? You've got, was the person available at the scheduled time? Did they follow instructions? Was there noise in the background? Did they focus during answering? What was their style of communication, right? Some ums and uhs and verbal utterances, that's normal, right? A lot of folks have that, and a lot of folks have it when they're nervous, but can they get through their nerves? Nervous jitter should start to decrease sometime during your communication. So if you've got a 15-minute phone call scheduled just to screen the person, 10 minutes in, they have not stopped, you can expect that that is going to come out on your phones when they are talking to people on the phone, okay? So you have to be mindful that yes, humans are humans, give them some grace, but humans at some point do have to rise to the occasion of being their best selves. And if they can't do that for you, then they really aren't the person that's likely to be able to do that for an intimidating candidate who calls your firm, right? Sometimes people call your firm, they're belligerent, they're scared, they're angry, they're aggressive. Sometimes people call and they're histrionic, they're crying, they're hyper emotional. Sometimes they're scattered. Sometimes they don't have the information. They can't answer questions for you. You have to be able to work with the person that's there. So the person that is talking to you has to be able to work with you in the same way you would expect them to be able to work with your clients. Listen out for dry mouth, listen out for my personal favorite. That's a good question, right? Sometimes people say that's a good question when they are trying to buy themselves some time. Sometimes they say that's a good question because they want to stroke your ego because they don't have a good answer. Okay, so just be on the lookout for how a person is giving you responses to what you're asking. Okay, the in-person interview. I highly recommend you have a hiring grid handy. You should have written out the criteria that you need for the person that you want to hire. So that means things like, what types of previous roles have they had, right? You want to have that documented. You want to have documented how many years of experience that they need to have. Typically, intake is a lower level position, and it oftentimes is a lesser trained position. So sometimes you're not going to get a lot of experience, but what sorts of things we're going to talk about actually, what are the best roles, previous positions for somebody hiring into intake. But you want to have that handy, right? You want to do a SWOT analysis for each role over the last 10 years. And you want to example test all of their answers. So if you ask someone, what do you think your greatest weakness is as an employee? Or if they have had a specific phone-centered call job, what do you think your greatest weakness is as a phone professional? And the person says something like, sometimes I can get a little nervous when I have to deal with really abusive people. That's one of the things that I've worked on, but I've gotten a lot better at it. You say, okay, great. Well, all humans can get a little flustered with those challenging personalities. Can you give me an example of when you have dealt most recently with a difficult, abusive person on the phone? What happened generally, and how did you handle it? Give me the story, right? Then they can tell you, they should be able to tell you with some level of specificity what happened. If they can't tell you what happened and you start to see them kind of grasping at straws or like, yeah, well, there was this guy named John Doe. And John Doe was abusive. He was rude, and I, took some deep breaths. You can start to hear that the person is trying to find their words, right? You want to be careful about people who are trying to tell you a story that they are working hard to convince you of, right? Because they're telling versus selling. If a person is working hard to get you to believe something, they're selling you, not telling you. Okay, so be on the lookout when you're interviewing people for someone who is selling you versus telling you. The other thing, why are you here? Why do they want to work for you versus wherever they are? They have a job. Why don't they want it anymore? Now, this does not mean that you have to be careful, because some people, they're mindful. They don't want to bash their boss. And most people know most new bosses don't want to hear you bashing the old boss. So there could be some resistance there, but you do need to have people be candid with you and say, listen, I want to make sure that I invite you into an environment that's going to be conducive to your career aspirations, what you like to do, that you're going to be happy here. And unless I know generally why you aren't happy where you are, I can't be assured that you would be a fit here, because we might have the exact same environment that you find displeasurable that you're now leaving. And when you give people that truth, a lot of times it opens them up. And again, you just assure them that you're going to keep it confidential, and you typically can get the answers. All right, hiring assessments. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'm a really big proponent of them. You want to get them so that you ultimately can identify drivers of behavior, right? You want to make sure that you screen out problematic actors, and you want to get help with motivating your employees. A lot of people believe that the best way to motivate an employee is to pay them more money. The problem with this belief is the same belief that lawyers have when they say the best way to get a client is to charge the lowest fee. Because a person is certainly going to have their own financial motivations, absolutely, right? We all live in a world that commerce requires money. However, if a person is so driven by money, that is a person who ultimately can and should be incentivized with money. A whole lot of people are not. And James, since you asked the question, the Real Talent Hiring Assessment is the one that I highly recommend, right? And actually, I think that's on the next slide. Because real talent hiring gets at things like personal motivations. You would be surprised that statistically, lawyers who are money motivated are the minority. Most people, when I say that, their mind kind of goes, that can't be true. This is psychometric data that actually has been measured in a host of different contexts, different studies that have been compiled. We actually are most motivated by ambition, personal goals. However, there are people that are money motivated. And for those people, you absolutely want to create a financial system that incentivizes them to do great for you. Is there another reason to do this job? Ronald, I'm not going to answer that question. Actually, I will answer that question. There are a whole lot of folks that want a high income, but there is a tipping point. So let me put it to you that way, right? If you're making $300,000 a year, and you generally like your clients, you generally like your practice, let's say you work 30 to 40 hours a week, and I were to say to you, I'm going to give you an extra $10,000 a month for you to work 60 hours a week. There are some people that would say yes to that, right? Some people would say $10,000 a month, that's an extra $120 a year, right? I would love to have an extra $120 a year because I'm motivated by that. So yes, I will do more work. But if I say to some people, you're going to double your work hours to get an extra 120 gross dollars a year, most people at that level are saying, okay, well, by the time the IRS gets their piece of it, that's an extra, I really only have 60 and not 120. And then out of that 60, that's $5,000 a month. $5,000 a month to lose half of my month? Nah, I think I'm good, right? I'll make more elsewhere, or I'll do something else, or I'll like my 300,000. There are a lot of folks that are perfectly fine once they get to a satiated level, right? Satiated for you might be 100,000, satiated for someone else might be 1 million, okay? But wherever that number is, being motivated by money is not, I want to be paid very well for what I do. Being motivated by money is that money will be the driver of the behavior, irrespective of what else could be happening in the ecosphere. So if I give you another option, you're going to choose the money option, even if time is available, even if better quality of life is available, right? We all know those folks that are in big law firms where they're fucking miserable, but they're willing to be miserable for 500 grand a year, right? Other folks say, I would rather make 300 grand a year and see my kids and, you know, see my spouse and see my parents and have hobbies and enjoy my weekends and be able to exercise and all the other stuff, right? There is no judgment one way or another. It is just to understand the human so that you can give the human what they need to be motivated to do what you need. Because if you motivate them well, you then get the best performance out of them, which gets you what you desire, which presumably is, Ronald, more money, right? Gets you more money, more time, better firm, all that stuff. All right, what to ask? Okay, in your interviews, you want to ask for behavioral data, examples. Super important that somebody be able to illustrate how they have been able to do whatever it is you're asking for. You want to ask for reactions for the person's leaving or being terminated, right? Why is it, how do people at your firm feel about the fact that you're going to be leaving? How do you believe your peers are going to respond? And you want to ask for contrasting information. Contrasting information is when a person says, I am really good at XYZ, you want to ask a question such as, give me an example of when you have not been good at XYZ. When somebody says, I have a real knack for ABC, right? And I'll give you some specific examples in the intake world, right? I have a really good way of rapport with people. People tend to like me. I'm able to open people up. Oh, okay, great. Give me an example of when you had a conversation with someone where you were really trying to open them up and you hit resistance. Because if they tell you they're really good at something, they should also be able to tell you times when they weren't good at it so that they actually have a system for how to be good at it. I would much rather hire somebody who is not naturally talented but has figured some shit out versus somebody who is naturally talented but doesn't know why. And then when they're not naturally talented with a certain type of person or a certain circumstance or a certain scenario, then they don't have any resources to draw upon, right? They're just a lost leader. Everyone can sell the person who is desperate to hire you, who is rich and is willing to write you a blank check. The people that are harder to sell are the people who have to spend their money on rent this month or your retainer fee, right? Those are the folks that I need you to be able to figure some shit out with. So if you can't figure things out, you're not the one for this role. All right, the in-person interview. This is where, when we get to the owner level, we're really trying to figure out the fit for the firm. Now, there are different schools of thought on this. How much fit you need for an intake professional is somewhat dependent on how much interaction they will have culturally with your firm. And depending on how your firm is structured, you know, if you have a remote firm and you're going to have your intake professional working from home, touching base with maybe your sales leader or your consulting attorney once a day, and they're going to have to talk to the owner maybe once a week, and maybe they're going to come to a team meeting once a month, that person is less risk than a person, if you have a brick and mortar office, everyone works together, you're a tight-knit small team, everyone likes each other, you're like family, there's greater risk. You have to evaluate not only what you have, but also what you're creating, right? And that will tell you how much, you know, annoying personality quirks, or perhaps a particularly rigid personality, or things that might be less desirable, how much are you willing to allow yourself to allow that into your ecosystem? You do want to deep dive into goals, hopes, and dreams, right? Is this a person that wants to be here for a year, wants to be here for 2 years, wants to go to law school in a couple of years? The answer can be, that's fine, right? We can absolutely hire somebody who's a great college student who wants to go to law school, wants to work in a law firm to see what it's like. They could be our best hire. And yes, you will have to replace them. But here's the thing that most people don't like to hear. Statistically, 20% of the labor force turns over every year. That means 1 in 5 humans. In your law firm, if you have at least 5 humans, statistically, you're going to lose 1 and have to replace them every year. Now, there are some firms that are really lucky, right? You hired great, the folks are stable, they want to be there, and they're there for many years. And then there are some firms that turn over every single year because they have shitty systems, they have a horrible management team, they have no structure and process, etc. Most of us are in between, right? Most of us are not turning over the workforce every week. Most of us are not going to have employees that stay for life. We're somewhere in between, but you have to prepare yourself psychologically for that in between especially with intake, because the intake role is a time-consuming and a stress-inducing role. Even if you have the nicest prospects in the world, people calling law firms are typically in distress, especially in criminal law. So when they're calling and they're in distress, that distress is then transferred to the human who's on the phone. And yes, there are some people that are better able to isolate themselves, deal with that stress, not take it personally, be able to hear the message and do the job. Most humans at some point burn out on that. Okay. So better to hire the best person and have a bandwidth of a couple of years. And if you're growing your firm aggressively, great. You can have 2 or 3 people. You could actually be overstaffed in the world of intake because it's not the most expensive role. And then when you lose a person, you aren't dying. That is a much better approach than saying, let me go try to find America's next top unicorn who'll be with me for life. Because with intake, that's really not happening. Okay. Then, of course, you want to think about the skills test. Always, always, always have a role play in your interview process when you are hiring for this role. I recommend you hire it for all roles. We do it with paralegals, we do it with attorneys, we do it with receptionists, we do it with intake, we do it with marketing. If you're going to do the roles, show me the goods, right? Show me the money. But particularly with intake, you want to make sure that the person has the figure it outness together with that personable, inquisitive employee attribute, right? You don't get that simply by asking questions. You get that by seeing the person doing the role. And then the money discussion. Now, money is something that in our culture is very loaded, in our world is very loaded. So there are usually going to be some money mindset issues that you may or may not be aware of when you are hiring for this role. But I assure you, you want to check for it. And we're going to talk about how to check for it in just a moment. Now, preferred prior experience. What kind of person do we want to hire? We want to hire somebody ideally that has worked in a call center before, because that is the type of work that they're going to be doing. That's ideal, okay? Highest priority is on outbound. They are calling out to people. While, yes, in your firm, you might have a batch of leads, people call in all the time. The reality is most law firms don't have the manpower to answer live calls for every human that calls for intake. So you're going to be calling people back. There are also going to be people that call and leave messages. If you don't have a 24-hour call center, or even if you do, that call center is going to be taking a message. They might be chatting the person up first, but they're still going to be taking a message for you. So you're going to have a skill at being able to not just call out, but to call out and engage the person and re-engage them from the point where they were last engaged with your firm, right? What did they last say that you can quickly say and get them reconnected with, oh, yes, I called you because, so that they will regenerate the conversation. Phone sales is ideal, right? You want somebody who's previously sold some things on the phone. Door-to-door sales is also really good. In fact, door-to-door sales is actually slightly better than phone sales for predicting the success of an intake professional. Why might that be? Well, door-to-door sales involves not just I'm able to sell, but it involves having to have the gumption, the courage, the wherewithal to approach a door live, right? We have a lot less door-to-door sales now than we once did. But you have this at the corporate level, you have this at college level. You know, the idea of having to approach someone and go hunt for what you want, very much an attribute that this type of person, if they have this background, can be good for intake. They also can be really good for selling people, right? Being a non-attorney salesperson. Complex item sales, right? Requiring high feature benefit analysis. They've sold something that's intricate, like a computer, right? Folks that have had to sell any type of technology software, anything in the world of tech is really good. Anything that involves a lot of bells and whistles, right? I want this and not that. You know, you can buy the music package for your Sweet 16. You can get the drums and not the synthesizer. You can get the dancers and not the light display. Here's what that might look like for you, right? Someone who has had to package those things together. And then researchers. Researchers are also very good for intake because they have to go figure out information, find information, search for information, hunt for information. They have to make sense of information, and they have to usually do it quickly enough to be able to seek out more information. That's exactly what you're doing in the world of phone sales. Now, the role plays. Again, you want to have a role play for your intake professional, and you want to test for the acumen of performing the role. Now, this is key. When we say test for the acumen of performing the role, we want to be very clear. You're not trying to make sure that the person has your entire process and follows your process to the letter of the law the moment that you bring them into an interview. That's not the purpose here. The purpose is to test for the acumen of performing the role. Are they personable? Are they inquisitive? Are they able to engage a human on the phone? Are they able to listen when a person objects to something? Are they able to talk about money? Right? These are the big picture things that you want to see that they have an aptitude for. How they do it, how they're nuanced at it, how to get better at it, you're going to train them on. But you want to see some raw talent here. Now, how does the person handle stress? Roll with the punches, take direction. If you have nasty, shitty people calling your law firm, you need to play a nasty, shitty person when you are role playing with your intake professional. Do not induce these people to think that you are going to get Mother Teresa calling the phone and she's going to be sweet and pleasant and jovial every time that you engage with her. If the people you currently have, forget who you want, okay? We all know that there's a thing of up-leveling your clients, right? You might very well desire to have better clients. You might desire to have richer clients. You might have a desire to have clients that have more intellect, more education. You might want to get into white-collar defense. You could have any number of desires. But where you are right now is who you're hiring for right now, right? Intake professional is going to meet your folks. So you need to play your folks on the phone. And you need to have personality variance in performance mode, right? Sometimes they're going to be nice. Sometimes they're going to be mean. Sometimes they're going to be happy. Sometimes they're going to be sad. Sometimes they're going to be hyper emotional. Sometimes they're going to be blah and uninteresting. And your intake professional needs to know how to deal with all of them. All right. Sorry about the little formatting there. We got a little issue there. I'm not sure how that happened. But ultimately, what this says is that you're going to choose 3 client avatars for your existing business, and you're going to give some general guidance as to what they need to be doing, i.e., what are the general things you need them to do when they're playing out the role of intake in front of you in the role play. You want to give a standard opening that usually is, "Hi, thank you for calling, fill in the name law firm. Please don't have anyone refer to your law firm as law firm." You're not law firm. You're the law offices of, or your Smith and Associates, or your John Doe, group, or whatever you are. You exist as its own special thing. You are not law firm, okay? But hi, thank you for calling. Fill in the name of law firm. My name is. How may I help you? You give them that, and then you require them to go through a process of asking questions. And some of those questions they're going to have to figure out. So you might want to tell them a little bit about your practice area. Hey, we serve clients that are accused of low-level drug offenses. There's some very basic things that you need to know. These are the types of things that we do. These are the things that we don't do. These are the areas where we appear, what counties, what districts, what courts. These are the ones that we don't. So that when you are giving data to the person, that person can say, oh, this is a prospect or not a prospect, right? So you want to have some identification in there. Then you do want to have your intake professional person request payment on the phone, okay? If you are giving free consults, I highly recommend against it for a host of reasons. This would not be applicable. However, if you are doing paid consultations, you do want to have your person ask for money. You want to see how they ask for money, and you want to have an objection about money in response to that request. It is very important that you see what you're working with. This doesn't mean that you're going to disqualify every intake professional that gets a little nervous as soon as the person says, there's no way in hell I'm paying $100 to talk to a lawyer. What the F is wrong with you, right? You might have that response. You want to see how they react. You want to see how they're able to engage with that, right? So you want to pose some common objections. Now, one of the things we are going to give you a little bit later is a resource tool that is going to allow you to actually see what some of the common objections are and how to deal with them. But generally speaking, you want to know how to deal with them before they come up, and the intake candidate may not know that. Okay, so some common objections. We're actually going to talk about that in a little bit detail, James. So I'm going to hold that until we get to that portion. Want to make sure that we actually cover that in some depth. Okay, is your recommendation to provide these role-playing scenarios ahead of the phone interview? No. So phone interview is going to cover some very basics. You basically, in the phone interview, you want to know why they're leaving the job that they have, if they have one, right? You want to know the SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, right? What are they good at? What are they not good at? Where do they see themselves going, which is the opportunity. And you want to assess threat from how long do you expect that you're going to be in this type of position, right? Then you want to explore generally what brought you to this job. Why did you apply? What is it about this role that interests you? That's the phone interview. You're really trying to disqualify people at the phone interview. Once you have not disqualified them and you move them to the first in-person interview, which would be with a team member, or if you're the only person right now, it could be with you, or it could be with someone that you designate. That's where you're going to start doing the role play, okay? In the role play scenario, you want to give them a little bit of surprise. Now, that doesn't mean you say, hey, I'm going to make you role play. Here's the scenario, go, right? You want to give them some background. You want to say, all right, we're now going to actually test the waters and actually see what this looks like. So I want you to, maybe you spend 15, 20 minutes interviewing them. Then you go to the role play. You tell them you're going to do a role play. You give them a scenario. You work for this law firm. Let's say a person calls in. I'm going to play Mary. Mary is a mother of her 18-year-old son, Stephen. Stephen was an honor student, never got into any trouble, and he has just been arrested last week and charged with criminal possession of a weapon. And Mary is terrified for Stephen. She needs our help. Stephen has been arraigned. He's out on, let's say he was released on his own recognizance into his mother's custody. Don't know that happens with 18-year-olds, but let's just play it, right? And you need to go through a process of getting Mary to schedule a consultation with us. We charge $250 for a consultation. So you need to talk to Mary about what the nature of the problem is, find out the details, get the payment from her, and get her scheduled on our calendar. Make sense? And then if the person has questions, great, because that tells you that they're inquisitive, right? They want to be prepared. A lot of times people put on the spot like that, they get nervous. So you kind of you want to genuinely allay their concerns. Like, listen, we're not expecting you to be perfect at this. This is something we're going to give you a lot of training on, but we just want to see how you engage with people on the phone, because that's a big part of this role. So here's some note paper and a pen if you want to write down any notes, if you have any questions, and then at some point the person will say, okay, I think I got it, right? They'll be a little nervous, but they'll start, and then you go into it. All right. Sourcing and role. You want to avoid certain things definitively. You want to not outline your exact process. Again, you're going to overwhelm the person if you give them 17 steps that they must follow as a part of the interview role play, right? You just want to have them, again, get the gist of it and show you what they got. You're showing your natural tendencies. You're showing your general personal disposition. You're showing your ability to respond quickly to people. Sometimes in role play, you want to have tears. Sometimes in role play, you want to have anger. These are natural human emotions that most people will encounter when they're in the role of intake, right? How do they deal with that? You don't want to present overly pleasant or excessively harsh avatars if that's not who you serve, okay? If you serve the syrupy, sweet grandmothers of the world in the world of estate planning, and that's all that your intake professional will ever speak to, then play that. If you deal with the truck drivers who have murdered their girlfriends and that's all you deal with, and these are the humans that are going to curse and are going to scream and are going to be abusive, then that's who you need to play. Most of us don't deal with those avatars. Most of us have some level of variation. So you want to do it a couple times. Let the person kind of get a sense of what this will be like. But you also don't want to tell the story before you tell the story in the role play. Right? You don't want to tell them, here's exactly what happened with Stephen. When Stephen was 5, he was molested by his uncle, and Stephen has had some emotional issues and he was in therapy at 12. If those are things that are going to come up on the phone, great. Don't give it to them at first, right? You want to have them hear some of the story in real time, contemporaneously, so they can be taking it in and they can figure out what next questions are. Right. I got a great story about intake. I remember one of my favorite intake professionals. He is now a practicing lawyer. So he has gone through our law firm. He was a great intake professional, went to law school, graduated, and he's just a great guy. But his name is, well, I won't say his name in case I'll protect the innocent or I'll protect the guilty. So we'll call him Steve. Steve got on the phone and we were going through the process of training. And one of the things that happened with Steve on the phone was Steve actually said to me, I got this one woman, I just couldn't get her closed, right? And we were recording the calls. We had the consent to record the calls. And we played the call back. And I said he was very close. And we kind of went through what worked, what didn't work, et cetera. But he gave me a very dejected, I couldn't get this person closed. And I was so upset about it. I said, well, don't worry about it. You know, you never know. She could call back, et cetera. Well, one day he comes into my office and he just looked like he had like hit the lottery. And I was like, what is going on, Steve? And he said, so-and-so, this woman called me back and I got her to schedule a consult. And he was so excited. I was like, okay, dude, tell me what happened. And so he says, I just want you to hear it. So he brought in the recorder and I played the recording. And it was really hard to play the recording because I'm a matrimonial attorney. So the woman calls my law firm and she says that she came home and found her husband on top of her sister. And in response to hearing this news, Steve said, great, is it time to schedule a consultation? I said, Steve, we kind of missed some steps there. I'm glad she's scheduled, but let's dial that back a little bit, right? So you'll start to pick up on some things. But anyway, that's kind of an example of where training went awry. So I took one on the chin for that. But anyway, you don't want to let last thing on this, you don't want to let your candidate break character in the role play, okay? By breaking character, we mean you don't want them saying, okay, they're playing the role, they're on the phone, they've got the hand up to the face, right? They're playing the intake professional and they ask a couple questions and then they stop and say, I'm sorry, attorney so-and-so, am I allowed to ask this, right? You say to them, stay in character, right? We've started the process. Just anything that you don't know, take your best guess, figure it out. There's no points for being brilliant at this. We're just kind of get a sense of what this looks like, right? Because you don't want the person, you don't really get a good sense of them as the intake professional if they are constantly going back and forth between playing the role versus trying to engage with you, right? And now asking a lot of questions, again, does show inquisitiveness, but you do want to direct them and guide them to be in character the whole time. All right. Now we got to my favorite part of this whole process where I screwed up with our great guy, Steve, the world of training, okay? Training and intake is really, really important. It is very time consuming. I'll be candid with you. Now, if you are a solopreneur, this is going to be challenging. I'm not going to lie to you. Take from it what you can, implement what works for you. You will get better as you grow. The other thing I want to share with you is I don't recommend that the lawyer be the one doing the intake training after the first iteration. So if no one has ever been trained thoroughly in your firm, you should be the one, or a lawyer in your firm should be the one training the first time out. After that, you can outsource it to an office administrator, an intake professional, a paralegal. It can be someone else, but initially you need to do it to get the cadence of what are the things that naturally come up so that those can be documented for the next person. But the first time out, it will take time. And I'm telling you now, this is a 12-week process. No one likes to hear that. It takes a lot of time, but if you do it well and you lock and load the right person, you have a system that you're going to record yourself training people so that when other people come into intake, you have not only the ability to have them listen to recordings of you training other people, but you also have the ability to have these things transcribed. You will have writings. You will have more data for them. They can consume and do a lot more without you. Okay, so it does get better, but the first time out, it's a humdinger, just be honest. Okay, some very key things that we got to get into. You must have a system for training. Training is not something you do when you fit it in. It's not something that gets onto your schedule when you don't have court. It is something that you need to diary on your schedule every single week for the first 12 weeks that you're going to be working with this person. We're going to talk about what that cadence actually is for that time and what happens in these trainings. But know that it does need a system. It also needs a budget, okay? Initially, when you hire an intake professional, the budget is probably going to be zero. They don't need anything other than whatever you have provided them to do the job. They probably have a computer. They probably have a license to access your CRM. Perhaps it's a shared license with someone else. You probably don't have an additional budget there. But ongoing training is something you want to develop a budget around, okay? In our Finance Academy, in the Law Firm Mentor Essentials Plus program, we have an entire category dealing with nothing other than how to create budgets around training. Because most lawyers don't think of it as a necessity. They think of it as something that they have to find dollars for. And if you don't plan for it, it very easily gets written out of the list of things to spend money on. The other consideration is that people will need a refresh, okay? After you've trained your person, don't assume that you're never gonna have to come back. There will be times where you're gonna have to circle back, and not necessarily because they're doing something wrong, but because you want to optimize. In my law firm, we have a weekly meeting called the Mike's meeting, and that stands for Marketing, Intake, Collections, and Sales. And all people that touch marketing, sales, and collections in my law firm come together and we do a status check on how many leads did we generate, what happened with them, how much coaching is required to get a better outcome, are there people that we missed that we could circle back to, what types of dollars are we collecting, why are we not collecting more dollars, is there something that we need to do to optimize performance? And this keeps people aware of their KPIs and always looking to get better. It is a collaborative meeting. It is not simply a check-in, but people need a refresh, right? So we have training built into those meetings as well as built out quarterly throughout the year. You want your metrics to be the focus, okay? When you are creating an intake training system, you want your person who's being trained thinking, how many people do I need to get scheduled every single week? How many dollars do I need to collect every single week? How many people in follow-up do I need to schedule an appointment every single week? They need to have that in their mind. And if it is a low number to start, that is okay. You're going to slowly move it up, right? You can hire a person and say, our goal is that you convert 68% of the people that call the firm, right? That is our goal based on who we consider to be an ideal client avatar. We want 68% of our ideal client avatars scheduling an appointment and paying for a consultation. However, in our experience, 50% is where most people start. So for you, we're going to start it at 40%. When you go live on the phones, your goal is 40%. And then we're going to review it. And then we're going to move it up. And by the way, by setting their expectation that they have a lower goal than what the average person does, they're going to be disappointed by that goal if they only meet that goal. You're also going to be able to incentivize them to exceed that goal. And you're also going to have an aspirational goal, which is that 68% goal that you threw out to them in their mind. They're going to be chasing those numbers. The way that you get people to chase numbers is you're candid about what the numbers are. Where should they be? Where do you expect them to be right now, which is typically lower? And where are you willing to let them start? Okay, willing to let them start means I recognize you're not at optimal performance yet. That's okay. We're going to get there, right? You want to get their mind geared toward the fact that they are going to be constantly improving their performance. But you also want them to hear that you're not going to punish them for not being at the aspirational goal to start. If you just say your goal is 68% or 67% of all people, and they start out and they only got 1 out of 3, they're going to feel shitty and they're going to feel that their job is at risk. And that type of anxiety tends to make people less productive rather than more productive. So you want to give them the aspirational, but you want to also give them the likely place that they will start. And then you want their goal to be lower than that so that they can immediately get the win psychologically. That is how you train people, right? It's kind of like if you think, for those of you that are parents, right? If you think about training your child to walk, around anywhere from 9 to 10 months, they typically started the process of cruising, right? They started pulling themselves up, holding on to things, moving one hand and one foot at a time to try to move along. At some point, you took them away from the thing that they're holding on to. And at some point, they got nervous, balance kind of got a little rocky, and they fell in their diaper. And many kids started crying. Well, you didn't then say, well, damn it, little Johnny, I put you on your feet. You're supposed to keep going. No, what did you do? You picked them back up again. Like, it's okay. Like, okay, that's supposed to happen, right? That's how we do this. It's okay. Let's do it again, right? That process for children is very similar to how it is for us as we are older. The only difference is older people, i.e. adults, have an awareness that they're being judged and evaluated based on a standard. So if you give them a standard against which they will be evaluated and you don't tell them that there is no penalty for not meeting that standard initially, their thought will go to punishment because humans are more oriented toward avoiding pain than achieving pleasure. Okay? The avoidance of pain is the avoidance of displeasing the boss. And they can't do that unless they have the opportunity to not meet the standard that is your ideal. Now, if they do hit the ideal, of course, you want to really incentivize, really celebrate all those things. But most folks are not going to do that first coming in, even if they're a good employee. So you just have to be prepared for that, and you have to prepare them for that. All right. How we start, okay? You want to allocate uninterrupted time on your calendar to train. Very important. Stick it on the calendar right now. It might need to change because some of you have court calendars that are kind of crazy depending on what it is. But to the extent that you can get it on the calendar to a time that it will not change, do that consistently every week. You want to provide a script. We're going to talk about scripting in a little bit, but you do want to provide a script and you want to go over it. Not only here's what it says, but the whys and the hows before the training. So before you actually start the process of training, you're going to give them their materials. It will include a script, and you're going to tell them, so let's walk through what this says. Maybe the walkthrough is them reading it out loud, and then you say, okay, pause. The reason why we asked them for their phone number is we want to be able to call them back. The reason why we asked them, how many, how many times have you reached out to the firm, or how did you get to the firm? How were you referred to us? Right? It's because we want to be able to generate more work from those sources. We need to know what those sources are. They need to understand the why so that not only do they have the script in front of them, but they recognize the importance of doing everything that is on the script, right? It's very easy to forget things if you don't have a rationality for it, if it's just a thing that you're supposed to do. Most people don't respond well to I told you so parenting. Similarly, they don't respond well to I told you so bossing. All right, next up. This one tends to be controversial, but it should not be. Record the calls. If you are in a two-party state, you must get the consent of the person on the phone in order to record them. You can do that in a couple of different ways. You can have a recording on the line that says this call is being recorded for quality assurance, blah, blah, blah. Statistically, you will lose people when you do that, okay? So you do have to keep that in mind. The other way that you can do it is to simply ask at the start of the call. And you can say, the reason why we ask for this is so that we are able to start helping you right away. Or the way you can build urgency with the process of recording is saying, I'm Susie, got your name, got your telephone number, got your email. Okay, Susie, so I'm going to get some basic information from you. But before we do, I'm going to record this call. And the only reason I do that is because attorney so-and-so, as soon as he gets back from court, likes to review every single conversation that we have so he can jump into your case right away, right? You give the person an incentive for themselves that benefits themselves as to why this information is being used. And then you say, basically, it self-destructs in 24 hours or, something to that effect so they know it's not going to be stored and, shared on the internet or whatever else people have in their catastrophe lines, okay? If you cannot get consent, if the person says, I really don't feel comfortable with that, if they're very paranoid, then immediately deflect from it, right? You don't necessarily have to have it. You can say, okay, I appreciate that. We want all the people we serve to be comfortable. We certainly don't want you to feel distressed. I'm not going to record the call, period. What you can record is your intake professional. So in other words, they should not have the person on speaker. You'll just be hearing one side of the phone call. One-sided phone calls actually have value. You will be surprised. All right, you want to set the tone with the employee that their goal is to catch them doing things right? Your goal in training them is to catch them doing things right. Because you want to tell them, most people that do this job, it's not necessarily intuitive, but I hired you because you had good intuition, right? If you tell them the reason why I chose you is because you were better than most folks, they will start out with positive self-esteem. And then you will tell them, I want to capture that positive action on your part because the more I tell you this non-intuitive thing that you're doing is the right thing, the more of it you will do. You will find that far more of what you are doing is right than is not right. So we want to make sure that we reinforce for you the things that you're doing right. And the things that you're not doing right, well, of course, they're not intuitive. Why would you be doing them right? It's something you have to learn. When they hear it from that paradigm, they hear, great, I'm already good at the things that I'm going to be doing. That's why I got hired. 2, I'm already expected not to be good at the things that I'm not good at, so I'm going to be trained. 3, I'm going to be celebrated for the things I'm doing right. Okay, they don't hear, I'm going to get in trouble if I fuck something up. I'm going to get fired if I don't hit a certain metric. I'm not going to be good enough, which a lot of people have messaging encoded into them in terms of a whole host of things psychologically, the way we raise children, the way that our society incentivizes people, etc. Just know that you are doing yourself a favor if you use psychological positivity cues instead of discipline and punishment and negative reinforcement. All right, you want to listen to recorded calls alone, then with the team member. Now, listening to the recorded calls, you want to do this alone first because sometimes you will be biting your knuckles, you will be rolling your eyes, you will be saying, what the fuck, okay? There will be times you will have those moments and you don't want to have those moments in front of your team for the first time. So you do want to do this alone to start. But then there are some very specific things you are going to be listening for, and I mentioned it earlier, it is text. It is tone, empathy, pace, pitch, and transition, okay? You are going to train your people on how to move the conversation along the conveyor belt, okay? Remember our conveyor belt analogy. Started off with reception, moved to intake, moved to sales, moved to legal. In the intake process, there is also moving along the conveyor belt. It is moving from the start of the call to the end of the call. And throughout that portion of the conveyor belt, you need to accomplish the nuances of the right tone, a high level of empathy embedded at the right times, the right pace and use of pace to speed up or slow down the conversation. And there are going to be times where you're going to want to do both. The right pitch, meaning at some point you are going to pitch the person on the service, not the service, hi, this is going to be a $10,000 fee for a XYZ trial, but pitch in terms of we need you to come in so you can meet with attorney so-and-so right away, right? That pitch that is going to require a fee has to be handled in a very specific way. And then, of course, you want to transition appropriately. And by transition, I've talked about this in several different trainings I've done. Transitioning means when a person starts to get too in the story, when they're telling you, when you ask them what happened and they say, I was born on a little farm in Butte, Montana, and you're thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be on the phone for 5 hours, right? You do want to move them along, but you don't want them to feel rushed. So you want to move them in a way that gets them to hear that you care about what's most important because you want to help them urgently, right? You do that in a very specific sort of way. The one thing that we always tell people is that there's a difference between interjecting and interrupting. So if someone is kind of going on their long-winded story and all of a sudden you are ready to pull your eyelashes out and you're like, okay, not going to do that, but I got to get them to shut the F up. How do you do that? Well, most people interrupt. Hey, Steve, I need to, right? And Steve feels like you just told him to shut up because in a way you did. You don't want to do that. You want to insert the person's name and a little list at the end of the person's name. Hey, Steve, like with a little question mark, right? I'm talking, Steve is talking, I'm talking, Steve is talking, Steve is talking, Steve is talking, Steve is talking. Hey, Steve, you just slightly give them a little moment's pause of interrupt. Then you pause, and then you reinforce whatever it is that you're trying to get at. So if you're trying to get at what is most important to them, and you ask them that question, and they say something like, well, so, here's what happened. My girlfriend and I, like, we have these fights all the time. I mean, she's just like, she goes out in these short-ass skirts, like all these guys hit on her, and I just can't fucking stand it. Like, and I punched the woman, but like, I didn't hit her or anything. Like, why she alleged that I did something like that? It's just fucking insane, right? And he's going on and on and on and on and on. At some point, you need to land the plane on Steve's story because you don't need to know that 15 years ago, he also got accused of punching a girlfriend when he actually punched a wall because that's how women are. They tell these lies. You don't need to know that. You need to know what is he accused of now? When does he have court now? Can you help him with this matter? Is this a case that you're willing to take? And you get at that by saying, hey, Steve, listen, I really hear how important it is that we get all these details about what's happened in the past. I mean, it sounds like you've had a lot of false accusations, right? Just from what you're telling me. But I'll tell you what, Attorney Minnick is really going to want to dig into this. And I just want to make sure that I get all the things that I have to tell him so he can prioritize getting you in as soon as possible. So I just want to now ask you, blah, 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 right? You validated the client. You let them feel heard. You reinforce that you heard something that they said, right? The girlfriends from 15 years ago that are telling stories, right? You state that back, right? I got it. I heard it. Definitely, I'm following you. I'm on the same page here. I just want to make sure that I can get you in right away, that I can get you to that, to that golden holy grail, which is the appointment. We can't do that unless I can find out XYZ, right? And that tends to get people redirected in a way that feels supportive rather than feels like you're shutting them down. All right. When you are going through the process with your training person, by the way, I should let you guys know, I didn't say this earlier, I am going through in the training portion probably about 25% of what is intake mastery, okay? You're not getting everything because we only had 2 hours. We are not here for 8 hours, which is now the total time of the course. So I just tell you that as a primer, not an invitation for you to buy the course. You can buy the course if you want to, but it's an invitation for you to know that we are going over the cursory big picture. We are not getting into all the details. All right, play and stop. When you meet with your intake person, you do want to have the recordings available and you want to play it in full once, let them hear the entirety of the call once, let them react to how they think they did. Do you think that went well? Do you think that went poorly? Do you think that went okay? Let me know. And then you want to play and stop. The play and stop is to check in when they did something really well and when they did something not so well, okay? It is important that when you play and stop, that you stop at good things and that you stop at not so good things. If you only stop at not so good things, you're going to create a trauma effect in your person, okay? Think about it like the dog. If every time you come home from work, you kick the dog, every time the dog sees the door open, the dog is going to start getting terrified and running away, okay? That is the trigger response that you create in people when you only highlight what's wrong. So you must listen to the recording by yourself first, and then you must find those areas where they did something really well. And ideally, the first time you stop the recording should be on something that they did well, okay? Like, could be 15 seconds in, you got all the name, rank, serial number data. All right, hey, Steve, do you know why I stopped the recording? No, did I forget something? No, listen, you got every single thing that you were supposed to get. You got the name, you got the phone number, you got the email, you said it in the right way so it wasn't optional, so they wanted to give you this information. You were pleasant in talking to them. Like, you want to build your person up through the things that they're doing well so they are psychologically reinforced to do them over and over again. Now, when they do something wrong, it works in the same way. Hey, Steve, do you know why I stopped the recording? No, I don't. Okay. Well, do you listen? I want you to, listen to this again. You can like rewind and play back, listen to this again. Right here, when prospect Sally says, I came home and my husband was on my sister, and you said, great. Do you think that that was necessarily a perfect codification of empathy that we've been talking about as one of the pillars of how we engage with people on the phone? Oh, no. Yeah, I kind of fucked that one up. Yep, sure did. That's okay. We're learning, but definitely don't want to do that again, right? Make it into something that is colloquially and casually conversant. You don't want to make it into this was stupid. How could you do this? Any idiot would know not to do this. All right. And I'm not thinking that most of you would do that to your team, but I'm just throwing out there because some people would. Okay. Once you get through that process, you want to find what's right and what's in need of improvement. And what you're going to find, by the way, you'll learn about this again if you take the intake mastery course. There are actually 3 calls per training session. You want to always have at least 3 calls. And one of the things that you'll find is that you want to pick out calls that are really good, calls that are just okay, and calls that are really bad. And by the 3rd call, sometimes the 3rd call is the bad call. Sometimes the 3rd call is just the okay call. Sometimes the 3rd call is the great call, right? You're going to find good and bad in all of the calls, but you will find that if you are doing this correctly and you have on a sheet of paper that your person, your intake professional, is to be looking for tone, empathy, pace, pitch, and transition, they will be evaluating themselves on these criteria when they go back and listen to their own calls. Because there will be time, by the way, when you're not involved, that they're going back and listening to their own calls to self-audit and evaluate themselves, okay? This process of learning, that's why you need someone, by the way, who is inquisitive, Because if you hire somebody who's naturally inquisitive and has a positive experience in training with you, they will then take that back themselves and they will then want to get better, right? They will want to get the A. They will want to impress the boss. They will want to do a better job. And you will teach them that by teaching them how they got better each week and reinforcing that each week. And once you get that process down, you will rinse and repeat this process, okay? Over and over again. You will have a meeting with them. You will have already listened to their pre-recorded calls. You will choose the 3 calls that you're going to listen to. You're going to then stop and play the calls with your person. First, you're going to listen to the call in its entirety, and the person is going to be reacting and taking notes, right? They're going to be diagnosing, but they're also then going to go through the play and stop with you, and you're going to be picking up on things. And typically, ideally by the 3rd week, okay, but typically by the 4th week, you will have an intake professional who, as soon as you stop, they'll say, I know exactly what I did, right? They're going to be chomping at the bit to tell you, oh crap, I didn't transition well there, you know, or person started talking and I cut them off. I interrupted instead of interjecting, or, oh God, I didn't use enough empathy when the person said that they were scared they were going to be arrested, right? You will find that they will develop that nuance. If you don't find that they have developed the nuance by week 6, you have the wrong person. Okay, so while it is a 12-week process as it is designed, ideally, you're going to start seeing recognition happening. Usually by week 3, they will get really, really good at it by week 4. I have never trained an intake professional. We've now trained 7 different intake professionals. I have been personally involved in 3. I've never seen an intake professional that by week 3 didn't show signs of getting it. So if you are doing this process correctly, you're giving them the script, you're giving them the recordings and the ability for them to go back and listen to their own recordings and the instruction that they must audit their own work, right? How many calls they are required to audit for themselves and do like their own little self-assessment is going to depend on the volume of lead flow in your office, right? If you've got 50 people calling every single week, between the calls out, the calls in, capturing the data, scheduling the appointments, taking the money, that are probably not going to have a whole heck of a lot of time to be doing self-auditing. However, if you've got that much lead flow, you probably already have an intake person, and your second intake person is the one you'd be training. If you only have 10 calls in a month, then you have a lot more time, right? But there's also a lot more at stake, because if they don't schedule the person and you only have 10 people available to be scheduled, there's going to be some financial resistance there. So you're probably going to wait a little bit longer before you put them on live calls, right? You're going to have whoever is currently scheduling continue that process while you're training up your new person. All right. We are at our last section of the day, and I have done something that I rarely do, but it is something that I did wrong in this session. So I'm going to go ahead and admit to that now. I did not ask you guys a whole lot of questions as we were going through. So I want to give you guys an opportunity as we go through this last section. Before we get to this last section, any questions that you have, any thoughts, any ideas, anything land that you'd never heard before, anything that landed that you're like, holy F, I'm not doing that. I can't possibly. Or things that kind of blew your mind. You're like, holy shit, this is going to be time consuming, but I can do this, right? What's going on in the minds of the folks that are on this feed? Talk to me in the chat, please. James has been very active. I appreciate that.
And feel free to jump in on the mic as well.
Yeah, guys, you can absolutely unmic yourself. Let me know any thoughts, questions you have. Do you incorporate the RAIN method in your intake training? So I love this. Carissa must be a follower of LFM, because we talk about the RAIN method a lot. First, for anyone that doesn't know what the RAIN method is an acronym, and it stands for rapport, aspirations, afflictions, impact, and new reality. Okay. And it basically is a sales protocol. It is how you move a person from the start of the sales conversation to the close. And the question of, do we do it in intake? There are elements of it in intake, but it's not exactly the same. Certainly you have rapport building, right? Rapport building is how we as humans connect and get people to be inclined toward us, to listen to us, to hire us, etc. So you always want rapport. But aspirations and afflictions are a little bit different in the phone intake scenario, because you're going to ask questions, right? If you buy the intake mastery course, we actually have a whole area where we have various different scripts that actually talk about what is the aspiration affliction section, right? But the aspirations and afflictions are, what is it that you want, or what is it that you want not to happen, right? What's ideal for you that's a positive, and what are you avoiding that's a negative? You're going to ask that in intake, but you're going to ask that from the perspective of what has happened first. You want to get a little bit of the story, and then you want to figure out, ideally, with that magic wand question, right? If I had a magic wand that could give you anything that you wanted right now, what would that be? Ideal for you right now, best case scenario, best outcome, money is no option, if money is no object, what does your life look like without this problem, right? When you ask that, you are getting to the punchline of aspirations and affliction, right? But you're not necessarily going into the level of depth that we teach when we talk about sales training. Now, we do have, again, in our sales academy within the Law Firm Mentor membership, we have a whole category that's just on intake versus sales, because they are different. But you do want to make sure that you are covering the big picture of what is it that you want, what do you want to avoid, how is life going to be better without this problem. The new reality piece, we don't cover it all, right? The new reality is solely when you meet with attorney so-and-so, we get you what you need, right? We help you. All right, Banks is asking, at any point in the traffic ticket call, should you give your qualifications, and at what point? Example, Mr. Huntley is a former prosecutor, 15 years experience, handled thousands of ticket cases like yours. So this is a great question. Thank you for asking it. This is the way I would characterize this. That is a part of this. What we refer to that as is your unique competitive advantage, your UCA. You know, a lot of people refer to it as USP, your unique selling proposition, but absolutely at the point of close, right? When you get to the end of the script, after you have gone through, you've explored the problem, you've gotten the nature of the urgency, you've figured out what is important to them, and then you've offered that solution by virtue of what's important to you is avoiding this problem. So therefore, come meet with attorney so-and-so, we'll get you in very quickly so we can help you avoid this problem. Then you would go through some of these things. Mr. Huntley is a former prosecutor, 15 years experience, yada, 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 yada. Now, what I will say about this is I love that you put in the chat what some of the qualifications are that you would normally include, because some of these are really great, right? The former prosecutor is probably something that people that are being defended love to hear, right? Because they like to know that you know the other side. You know, handled thousands of tickets, absolutely. Volume is really impressive to people, especially when that volume is a problem that they have, right? I've been through thousands of X type of case, a great one. But if there's anything that differentiates you, no comments. So I'm not seeing you on camera, so no comment. You know, the other attributes that people look at are things like, unless you want to sell that, by the way, I guess you could sell very handsome too. You know, they do have OnlyFans for men, I'm told. You can absolutely have that as a criteria. But if you're differentiating yourself from others, presumably you want to list things that would make you stand out in the marketplace. So 15 years experience might be something that has you stand out. Maybe people that are handling tickets in your area tend to have 5 years, 10 years or less, right? But it also could be something that's a little bit more definitive. Could be something like, you know, is a certified criminal trial attorney, or is, has recently lectured to the judges of our state at Judicial College about XYZ issue that happens to overlap your case, or is in your particular courthouse 3 out of 4 court days of the week, and in particular before Judge so-and-so, right? If you happen to know that Judge so-and-so is the judge before whom this particular case is venued. So the more you can connect the list of unique competitive advantages, right? That goes again at the end of the call, that happens at the close. The more you can wrap that in to your request for money and your attempt to schedule, the more likely a person is already going to have had the experience of, I need to hire this person, and then they're going to have reinforcement of that with the logic of the data you're going to get, right? The sale actually happens at the emotional level. It's asking the right questions. So that's the reason why we can sell lawyers that are less credentialed, less knowledgeable, less well-known in the industry. Because if you have the right emotional conversation, the right sales conversation, you can sell anything to anyone. Now, obviously, the better and the more credentialed the lawyer, the easier it is to sell. So then you wrap all those logical points in there, and it gets a lot more done for you. But thank you. That was a very, very good question. Okay. Let's shift now and talk a little bit about money mindset issues. And we're running low on time, so I'm going to go through this really quickly. But the reason why I included this and the reason why we always talk about money when we talk about intake is because one of the things that we have seen almost universally that stops success in intake is resistance around money and money conversations. There will be people that call your law firm that say, I only want to know what it costs, right? You have to know how to deal with that issue. You have to know how to shut down the conversation around money in a way that doesn't shut down the person. And you have to shift the conversation to what is going to get the person the solution they want. Because anything can be bought cheaper than what you're selling it for. And people need to hear that, right? There are some times where a host of different ways that we deal with money objections has not worked. And at some point in time, I've told my team, if a person, having gone through all of these different ways to deal with money, still says, I only want to know what the cost is, then I say to them, do you want cheap, fast, or easy? You don't get but two of them. Pick the two that matter to you. And if the two that you pick are cheap and easy, then this is not the law firm for you. Candidly, there is no law firm for you, but I am not going to have the lack of integrity that other law firms would have to lie to you and tell you that. And once they hear, everyone's going to be selling me a bill of goods and it's going to be cheap and easy, these folks are being candid with me that they can't tell me what it's going to cost until I come in, or the fee is not something that I'm going to get without giving a lot more detail. Then you can start to shift the conversation. But it is a shift of conversation, right? So you want to test your intake person for money mindset issues. And one of the things that I want to cover before we run out of time, my personal favorite is number 3 on here, right? It's the attitudes toward money in general. So you want to give your intake person some scenarios and just ask them on a scale from 1 to 5, right? 1 is you hate the task, 3 is neutral, and 5 is you love the task. How do you feel about all these things? Borrowing money from a friend, spending money on a credit card before you know you have the money in the bank to pay it off, responding to a client complaint about the cost of a service. 3 hungry people, this is my personal favorite one. 3 hungry people, $5 would be given. By the way, you can tell this was pre-COVID, right? Right now you need about $50 to get a Big Mac, but let's say $50 is given to one person only and cannot be shared with the others to use on food. And the food you purchased cannot be shared. You receive the $50, right? How does that make you feel? You love it, you hate it, you're neutral. And then service is purchased, agreement is signed, money is paid. Client is evicted from her home. She needs $1,000 to move into her new residence. She does a chargeback of the lawyer's fee and claims she's unhappy. Is it justifiable? And you'd be surprised what types of answers comes out of these types of scenarios. But the answer, the reason why you're asking is not to judge the person. It's not to say, oh my God, the person thinks it's justifiable to claw back a lawyer's fee so they have housing, right? It's not a true test. It's a test of how they feel and what they can express about how they feel. And when they express how they feel, it's an opportunity for you to ask them how they can exist in a world where they might have to do things that run counter to how they feel, even though their job depends on it, right? So case in point, in Law Firm Mentor, we have several clients that have toyed with or used non-attorneys as salespeople. And one of our clients has a non-attorney salesperson who at some point in time evidenced a lot of challenge selling a particular service. This person worked with some lower level market and some higher level market. And in the lower level market, this person ultimately was having difficulty getting folks closed, even though the lawyer wasn't having that difficulty. And so we started to listen to some of these sales conversations that were recorded. And what we found was this person was simply not making an offer to people who were of lower income. She was not asking for the sale. And when we asked why, she ultimately said, well, I just don't feel it's right if this person can barely pay their rent, that we're taking money to help them with blah, blah, blah. And we had any number of reframing conversations, like, did it occur to you that they're borrowing the money from a friend? Did it occur to you that if they don't have this particular type of legal help right now, they're actually going to be in worse financial condition next week? You know, did it occur to you that they have every right to spend their money on whatever they want, and it really isn't your choice to decide what they should and should not spend money on? You know, the person could not do a reframe. And so some of the conversation in intake, because it is a lower ticket item, typically, you're typically going to sell a consultation fee, right? You're not usually selling tens of thousands of dollars in service. You're usually selling hundreds, if not 8,000 in a service. You usually aren't going to have that, but you do have some of that, right? So some very basic things. You want to discuss money with prospects from a place of being confident, direct, ensure that the voice is steady. You don't want to take things personally. Big fan of the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. If you have not read that book, it is a Bible of life in my view. And I am not a religious person, so I say Bible. It could be the Torah, it could be the Quran. It could just be a cool book, but it's a great book for life. And you want to remember to distinguish your beliefs about money from all beliefs about money, right? The fact that you would not have spent this money on my service does not mean that client would not have spent this money on my service. Now, having said that, we are now at the top of the hour. And so I do want to give you a resource. This is a resource that we've created that is all about intake objections and how to handle them. It's a nifty little cheat sheet. We have several of our clients that just keep it on their intake professional's desk so that they're able to say, okay, how do I deal when somebody says I can't afford the consultation fee? Or when a person says I shouldn't have to pay a lawyer, these consults should be free. Or when a person says, I really don't have the time to come in person, and that's a requirement of your system. We have a cheat sheet that helps you with that. The link is on the screen. It has to be typed in exactly as it is on the screen. So it is bit.ly / all caps LFM intake, capital I, OBJ, capital O. If you would like that resource, it is available to you. I will put the link into the comments, and that is my time. So I want to thank James for having me here and giving me the opportunity to speak to you good folks. I'm going to go ahead and put my camera back on just so I can say goodbye to everybody. But if you guys want to reach out to me, you can always reach out to me at info@lawfirmmentor.net. Any questions you have that we didn't get to, I'm happy to answer for you.